Today on the Hobby Bench, I'll be talking about a zombie spawn variant for County Road Z. So I finally got my rulebook for County Road Z. It's a gorgeous hardback, and sort of been looking at some of the missions I've been setting out. This is the first one I have, establishing a community, and we'll go back a little bit more on the book. It's gorgeous. It's very well laid out. I sort of like that you have little sections cordoned off for certain rules. It's a great book. And now, when you handle spawning zombies, there's two different ways that they sort of handle that. One is going to be using an X and Y coordinate. And so you'll roll two different dice and then multiply that result times 3. And then you can sort of figure out, where that your zombie is going to spawn and do it that way. The second way would be picking up the center point, rolling a die, adding 3 to that, and that's using that sort of as a radius. So that sort of more clusters around in the center a little bit. It's a little chaotic, but that's the way of doing it. So for me, I wanted to sort of structure that a little bit more and having some more spawn points. And so I use these little plastic beads. And so I have 5 points that are set out. They're 7.5 inches from the edge, and then I have one that would be dead center. And so I have 5 points total. There's an option also, you could just maybe do 4 and set it up that way. I just try using 5 so you have a little bit more out in the center of that. And so the idea, of course, would be like 2 for each, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and of course the center would be 9, 10. You could also have a variant where you have it set off a little bit more along the center line, and that could be a higher spawn, maybe 1 through 8, and then you could have 2 other points that might be like maybe 9 and 10. So it's more distributed along a center section. So for determining it, again, I'm just going to have 2 for each point, roll those dice and sort of allocate them out. So the top left corner would be, starting that would be 1 through 2, then 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then 9, 10 would actually be on the center. So just, sort of allocate those off where those are sort of lined up. It's not too hard for doing that. And then I'm just going to use a radiant method here. I'm just going to roll a die and then making that the center point and then have it go off. Now being 7.5 inches, of course, you're going to max out at a certain distance, making it 10 inches there. So there's a couple ways you could do it. You could maybe just divide the distance by 1/2, and you could have it just a little bit shorter, and you could do it that way. So it's maybe a little more clustered around that center points. Alternate, maybe you could just use a different die. You could use a D8 if you want to. That's a possibility of that. And of course, you always have the option that you could just move it, 10 inches from each side. But I sort of like having it a little spread out a bit more so that you've got some corners that might be a little bit more tighter. But if you get a radiated edges more inside the board, you can get that full 10 inches and you can really get a good spread coming out. So I have another one there, of course, being 7, so it's going to get up against the board edge just about. And you'll just keep this process up, rolling those through. And this is sort of why I like it at 7.5 inches, because if you do get those radiant edges, you really spread those out in the middle there. And it's a little more structured than maybe just doing the radiant from the center of the table, but still give you quite a bit of variability. And I like that idea too, the aspect of, just even for resources, you really have that initial randomization of where it's going to be, what sort of section first, and then it's even more chaotic about how far it'll be off in that section. And you'll just keep repeating this process through. And I dig this too because, there's ways that I probably would not expect to have those sort of clustered up, that sort of happen a little bit. And I like this method because you get some that are sort of spread out. You'll have some that are a little more clustered up. And so this adds just a little structure to some of the chaos that you'll have, maybe from rolling radiantly, but then also just have a lot more variation with that. And, the pickle, of course, is that if you have a distance of 7.5 inches, that you might have corners that are going to be a little bit more heavier. It could be a way of just moving that token from 10 inches to the edges. Or if you just going to use some different die types, just use a D8, you can get this clustered around. And that's where I select that variation, too, that if I want to have these more of a center off point, you don't have to roll a D10. You can roll a D6 and go from that. And those would be like really tight clusters for that. It adds a little structure and still has that entropy, that chaos of rolling. Rather than rolling, let's say, from an X and Y grid, that could take a little bit of a time. And then I think the other point of is rolling off the center. That works too, but I like to have just a little bit more spread out. So County Road Z, it's a fun rule set, and working through different ways of digging out the spawns is completely possible. You have in the book of just having the XY coordinates. But I do like having these little spread out spawn points and just working it out using a radiant version from those rather than just one in the center. Now for the corner ones, I use about 7.5 inches, and that could be a little bit of a pickle having a shorter distance. One way could be, of course, is just using an 8-sided die and doing that. Or you could, of course, move those out and make this, 10 inches from the corner. But regardless, this is a great way, I find, of spawning out zombies. Adds a little bit more structure to that. Also want to highlight too, for using these, I like using these 25mm discs from Atomic Laser Cut Designs, and they're great tokens for showing passive versus active zombies. Overall, I like it. This adds a tiny bit of structure to how the zombies are laid out, but also just allows some chaotic placement that's a little bit more over just the radiant method. The grid always works, but for me, I think in application it just takes a little bit more. It's a little fiddly, and I think I enjoy this method a little bit more.